Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope you're doing very well. I would like to answer another viewer question from a viewer, and it's a very interesting question. And the viewer's username is Jared T. Jared T. So I apologize, but I hope I can call you Jared, if that's okay. But your question, Jared, was a very interesting one, and so I'd like to take the opportunity to answer it in a video form. You've already given me your permission to do so thank you very much. And your question was, and again, I'm going to paraphrase it. Daisuke, what do you think about binge watching movies and TV series and the like? So this concept of binge watching is, let's say you have maybe maybe a series of TV series that's comprised of, that's made up of maybe more than one episode, like 5 or 6 episodes or more than one episode. So binge watching would be just watching all or most of those episodes in one sitting. So that can span many, many hours in the day. And so Jared, he asks, what do I think of binge watching? And of course I should say also, before I answer the question, that binge watching can also apply not only to episodes within the same series, but also maybe watching 2, 3, 4, 5 films in a day or something like that. And so how do I feel about this? That's a very good question. I don't have any philosophical objection to binge watching. I don't think it's in any way a bad thing. I think it's a perfectly fine approach. And the reason is, well, I think there are many reasons why I think binge watching is fine. Now, I should say from the outset that I can see how maybe some people might think, for them anyway, binge watching isn't the way to go. And it's because if one binge watches, let's say 3 or 4 or 5 films, then the risk, of course, is that later, days, weeks, months later, as you look back upon that time and you watched all these films in a single sitting, or all these episodes in a single sitting, the risk is that everything tends to blend together. So the memories of a particular film might be affected by your memories of watching another film that you saw in the same sitting. So everything becomes enmeshed. So it's hard necessarily to remember that particular film when you've seen so many others in the same sitting, you know what I mean? So it all tends to blend together. And I don't know if that's, that might not necessarily be a good thing, and I know people might feel that way. And also, related to that point, if you have certain films that have a certain, let's say, level of intensity, and you watch them all in one sitting, well, maybe the act of watching one film first, that is of a high intensity, might then affect your appreciation, or it might affect the way that the second film will impact you, because you have already been numbed in some way, potentially anyway, by the effect of watching the first film, that when you get into the second film, you're already somehow maybe psychologically or physically affected. So it's, again, how does one recover in time in order to be able to give the second film or the second episode the attention that I think it would deserve? So again, these sorts of implications I think are very important, and it really depends on your own approach to cinema and how you absorb cinema, and more generally how you absorb information. So it really depends on who you are and what your approach is. Now, with those comments, generally speaking, out of the way, I should say that for me personally, I have nothing against binge watching. I think it's a perfectly fine approach, as I say. I don't think there is anything wrong with it. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with watching a lot of things at once, and then maybe days or weeks or months later you think back and it seems to all blur together. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. You know, there's no rule, right, that says that one has to remember everything exactly. Memory is often by association, so you remember things by associating it with other things. So there's nothing wrong with associating your memory of a film with the memory of another film. There's nothing wrong with associating two or more films together. Of course, it might affect your recall of the film, and so if you feel at all uncomfortable with that, there's nothing, I should hope that there's nothing that would stop you from revisiting a film again and watching the film and just gathering your thoughts on a particular film and then making sure that whatever it is you want to remember is firmly remembered in your mind the way that you can remember it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because you, as I said, when you binge watch something, you can always revisit it. At least I hope so. So, and also I do appreciate the fact that I think many people out there have this great level of stamina such that they are able to watch so many things maybe within a given 12, 16, 24-hour period or so. And I really admire that very much. I find that to be very wonderful. And so I'm very jealous because I don't necessarily have that level of stamina. You know, I think I mentioned that when I watch a film, I have to watch a film usually at night, very late. And if it's on a weeknight, it's tough because I have to wake up early, very early for work the next day. And so I'm usually up by, well, now I kind of wake up naturally at 5:15, so I don't know. I try to go back to sleep, but I can't. But I don't do that every night, though. And so, for instance, if I'm up and I only sleep maybe an hour one night, then the next night I'll probably watch a film. I probably won't watch a film, and I will maybe sleep early that night. So that's to say that I have very low stamina, physically speaking. And that also means that I'm not able to binge watch or to do that intense watching as much as I used to when I was younger. I think the last thing I remember binge watching was it was the Decalogue, actually. I remember when I first got the Criterion edition of it. And actually, no, in the same time I also got the Arrow edition, but I did this with the Criterion edition for whatever reason. And it was, I just watched it, and I just, when I saw the first episode, I just couldn't stop. And when I finished the second episode, I just couldn't stop. And I just couldn't stop. And I just found myself not being able to stop until the last episode. And I just was just, I think it was too much information overload. And I think for me it was it was a remarkable experience. It was truly, it was like, my soul was being ripped apart, and then it was being put back together again, piece by piece, in a way that only the Decalogue could do. And it was unbelievable, but I don't think I would be satisfied with just watching the Decalogue on that experience alone, if you know what I mean. So, of course, I revisited the Decalogue again many times after that, focusing, for instance, on a particular episode and then leaving it be and then focusing on another episode. So then I was able to make everything clearer in my mind as to what happened in which episode and stuff. So in other words, for me personally, the act of watching the Decalogue in that binge watching experience, if I had left it at that and I didn't watch the Decalogue again, I think I would have probably been doing myself a disservice, because everything blended in together, and so it meant that I needed to revisit the Decalogue in installments, so to speak, and to make sure that I had everything straight in my mind, and then from there a further examination of what the implications of the Decalogue were, in particular certain episodes, and what were the moral dilemmas that at stake there. So for me, I think binge watching is a great place to begin. I think, and I think also it's nice because it's really an expression of how excited one is for a particular work, and there's nothing wrong with expressing one's excitement. I think, in fact, the more ability or the more avenues by which one can express one's excitement for cinema, I think the better off we all are, and I think it's wonderful. Truly wonderful. Binge watching is great. Nothing to be ashamed of. But again, it's just a matter of how you are then able to, or at least maybe let me just speak for myself, how I am then able to reevaluate and recall what it is I actually saw. What is it that I want to take away from my viewing experience? And so for me, that means I want to make sure I have certain details down. I want to make sure I have certain plot details or certain other nuances that I might not necessarily be able to recall relying on my own binge watching experience alone. So I hope that answers your question. And just to conclude, I have nothing wrong with, see nothing wrong with binge watching, and I think it is an expression of one's excitement for a particular work or particular series of works or a grouping of works. And so there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. Just make sure, and again, I think it's an expression of stamina. It's an expression of one's willpower and one's true devotion towards this thing we call, the visual arts. So I applaud anyone who is able to do that and who's able to summon up the energy that it takes to do so. I really admire and respect that, and I'm very jealous of anyone who has that ability. And I'm even more jealous of anyone who's able to binge watch and recall everything that he or she saw with precision and detail. That is a skill that I will never be able to have. And so anyone who has that, I'm very jealous, and you have my utmost respect. So, okay, so Jared T., I hope that answers your question. And yes, if you have any more questions, please feel free to let me know in the comment section below or elsewhere. I'd love to continue our conversations, my friend. I really appreciate it. Okay, so that's it for now, and until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Cheers, my friends.